So this is a super fun and special episode for me because we have hit the big 50. Yes, that's 50. And I just got to say, hosting the Campfire Circle podcast is definitely one of the most fun and rewarding things I get to do. So thank you for being here and sitting by the fire with me. We've got some juicy questions here that's crowdsourced from our community on all things LinkedIn, storytelling, and standing out as we stand up for our mission. So let's just get into it, friends. Hey, I'm Tania Bhattacharyya, and you are listening to the Campfire Circle podcast. We are all about breaking down the boardroom table as the ultimate space of leadership, and instead replacing it with a campfire. Because that's where we share our stories. That's where we build warm community, and that is where there's always room. I'm building an impactful business in public through thought leadership, and I'm taking you behind the scenes all along the way. So if you want to stand out as you stand up for your mission, you are in the right place.
What's happening, Tania? Happy 50th episode. As a digital project management consultant, I often grapple with my own content in the best ways that I can create great stories for lessons on all things relating to managing, leading, and executing projects. And to many people, the everyday work might seem boring, but I actually think there is a lot of really great adventure. And so I want some advice on how I can do really great storytelling on lessons learned, things I've experienced. So that's the route that I'm looking to go into. But I'd love to know, how can I better think of or design a really good way to do storytelling within the project management space? Thank you so much. Bye.
Hey, Ashley. Thank you so much, my friend. You know, from knowing you personally and the huge personality and the positive energy that you bring to everything you do, you are already doing a lot of these things that I'm about to suggest, but it is a really great question. And there are some fields or some things that in terms of the day-to-day work are just a little bit more boring than other things. Like project management might be one. Grant writing might be another. Don't get mad at me. I'm sorry. It just is what it is. Data analytics might be another one. They're all necessary for social impact work, but yeah, people don't always want to hear about the day to day. And so I think sharing our stories on LinkedIn is less about sharing the minutia or the day to day, but instead the deeper why behind your work and the end outcome of how things can change for your community as a result of that work. And so a couple thoughts here. So when we're working in the trenches of a transformation, again, whether it's project management or grants or data, as consultants and coaches and service providers and leaders in this thing that we do, oftentimes we are like at a PhD level of this thing. We go to conferences about this thing. We speak in jargon to our peers about it. We get very specific. We get very detailed, that like complexity is very important to us. And I think one of the challenges in telling stories about externally seeming boring, or like, I'm just going to call it complex work, is that we feel like we have to sound super smart when we are talking about it on LinkedIn. But if the way to really make an impact in your storytelling is to actually talk about it in terms that people can understand and are attracted to. So how can you paint a picture of the end outcome of project management, right? So there's this thing that I often say, which is like, instead of, let's say we're talking about trying to sell tickets to an airplane. Instead of highlighting how far back your airplane chair reclines or how yummy and nutritional that meal you're going to get is, instead, you're going to talk about the tropical destination that you're taking your clients to, right? There's a reason that airplane ads have like beaches and things, not, you know what I'm saying? And so some storytelling avenues for a seemingly maybe boring field could be case studies, right? Where you're really showcasing that human element. And that story from going from like disorganized and fly by the seat of our pants and like just our hair is on fire with all of our projects, to then how you specifically intervened and using audience-friendly language for all of this. And then talking about what life is like for them now, right? What is different? What is better? What is transformed? What is exciting in their life and business because of your project management, right? What is that tropical destination you've got them to? Now, the converse of this is to focus on stories of what can happen if you don't invest in good project management, which I feel like you do with your key brand messaging around the cost of disorganization, Ashley. But in these stories, I think you want to be as specific as possible so that the people who are paying that cost of disorganization or feeling that cost of disorganization really see themselves and their current situation reflected back in that story. And they begin to listen more closely because they know you're talking to them, right? They know this is for them. And so, instead of a story that vaguely touches upon, not having good project management or, not having a project management person can feel like you're operating in a car crash, right? Why is that? Like, what does that feel like? Who starts to get involved at that point? What's at risk? What things start to happen? What specifically do you mean by the fact that, not having good project management can feel like a car crash, which is something I saw you share in one of your posts. I agree, but like, what does that specifically look like? What can that story specifically drill down on? And, that specificity is what makes stories so resonant. Another idea, so the last idea I have for you is to take a timely event sort of in our social consciousness and share your expertise behind it, right? So there's this PR person that I follow, and anytime a celebrity is doing some like PR crisis management, they're like in the news for all the wrong reasons, she will do her hot take on what she would have done instead as a PR person, right? And why. And I think that is so smart. And so similarly for you, like what are some of the big societal happenings right now? As I record this, it's a year till the big election day. And I think it's heavy on people's minds, So maybe how would you come in and project manage a presidential campaign, right? What's that? What can you tell a story about that? The holidays are coming up. So how would you project manage hosting a huge Thanksgiving with 100 people, right? Like these are just random things. But what can you tell a story about and, give people a behind the scenes look around your thinking and your approach? Because if they resonate with it, they will keep you in mind the next time they have a complex or complicated project with a lot of moving parts, right? So how does that land with you?
Hey, Tania, Tracy Keys here of Tracy Keys Consulting. What I do is support my clients in the animal protection space in rocking their retention rate. My question is this: in your content sprint, you provide a wonderful framework for keeping posts focused with consistent messaging about our work in the world. So when is it okay to post outside of that framework, meaning post about something that feels like a good and valuable share that may have nothing to do with Tracy Keys Consulting? Thank you.
Hey, Tracy. Yes, indeed. Okay, so I just want to provide a little bit of background for the folks who aren't familiar with the inside of my LinkedIn content sprint. I share a strategic sequence of repurposable content that's designed to bring your audience along their journey, right? Their, I guess you could say, customer journey, their follower journey. It's a journey that builds trust in you and your solutions. So generally speaking, it moves from talking about why you care. It goes from sharing your founder story and then going into a batch of content that showcases like why they should care. Then you're going to share some stories about what life can look like after this transformation. And then finally, towards the end of these, in this framework, there's about 24 posts. We finally share how you specifically work with people. And these last posts tend to be more about conversions in terms of applications. They drive sales calls. They drive, conversations about working with you. But all that being said, there's a reason why we start with why. That's what Simon Sinek says, right? Start with why. We start with that because that's what creates that connection and that resonance that your ideal audience, it just creates that connection and resonance. And so when you are showing up with your vision and your values and your perspective, the right people show up. People want to buy from people who have aligned opinions and ways of seeing the world. It doesn't just have to be about your company. Like, they can be silly things sometimes. So, story time. I just had a wonderful sales call with the ED of a large foundation, right? They're an organization that grants like hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And so I get on the Zoom call. We're talking about doing a LinkedIn VIP day. And the first thing their ED says to me is, "Hey, I just wanted you to know that I know you're a Ravenclaw. I'm a Gryffindor." And it was so just like, it was just wonderful. And I almost fell out of my chair giggling. But the reality is, sharing things that have nothing to do with our work can create moments of shared humanity and connection points that can create a bridge, right? It can actually draw in the people you want to serve. And so, to answer your specific question, Tracy, it is always okay to post outside of the framework I teach, because a framework is just a suggestion and you get to make it yours. And I know you, Tracy, are hugely passionate about animal rights. So when something happens in that world in terms of news or piece or like policy that's being passed or trends happening in that space, like, share about it. When you foster a new puppy, share about it. When you have a delicious vegan meal as you travel across the country, as I know you often do, you can share about it. But I think the key is to tie it back to your larger vision, right? Tie it back to that through line. Um, and this is perfect for you, actually, because I know you're so passionate about animal rights and you support animal protection nonprofits as a consultant with donor retention and donor engagement. But not everything has to be or should be about donor retention. The more people know about your love for animals and the more you share about that, the better, because your clients also care about that, right? These are the people you work with also care about that. And so that can lead to some really magical conversations and relationships. So yes, do it. And, I'm talking to Tracy, but I'm talking to all of you, because even if you think at face value, these kind of maybe slightly more random things you want to share have nothing to do with your consulting firm, I bet there's still a thread back to your vision. I bet there's still a through line, because you are an integrated human being and your company or, your mission driven org is an extension of your deeper why. So if you think something's valuable, share it, but see how you can tie it back to your why.
Hi, Tania. This is Dulari Gandhi, and I work in social impact to help people communicate clearly in a complicated world. The question that I have for you is, what do you see as the difference between sales, marketing, branding, and thought leadership? How can folks stand out in each of these lanes, but make sure that everything works together in a cohesive way? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you. Bye.
What's up, Dulari? I appreciate this question a lot, because sometimes we use these words interchangeably and they are interconnected for sure. But let's go through the thought exercise of seeing how they're different and maybe when they're needed, or even the order that we can think about these so that everything works together in a cohesive way, like you said. So let's start with branding, because I think that more than anything, branding is the foundation. So I think of branding as the work of intentionally shaping the reputation and the perception and honestly the vibes of your company. Branding is like your vibes or yourself, right? If you're a personal brand, like a coach, consultant, speaker, solopreneur. And part of branding, of course, is your logo and your brand colors and your font. But I think what's more important than that is your values. And again, the why behind your work. It's getting clarity on your vision and getting really clear on your passion and the lived experiences that you've had that make you a guide in the work that you do, and the things that make you credible in your sector. And yeah, I would say it's important to have some thought process around this before starting to get visible with your marketing, which is what I think comes next. So let's talk about marketing. So marketing are intentional activities meant to get you in front of your target audience, to create interest and attract the right people in. And it's a very broad term. having a booth at a conference is marketing. Doing a Facebook ad is marketing. Sending a mailer, doing an email newsletter. There's so many different things that are marketing. But again, all of your marketing will be more successful if you have a strong and clear brand foundation first. So then thought leadership is maybe under marketing, but it's more than that. Like, I think of thought leadership as a form of, like, it's like a way of being, right? It's about showing up consistently, being rooted in your values, showing up as a go-to voice, showing up as a practiced guide in your niche or your industry, which might at first glance appear self-promotion-y, like this idea might seem self-promotion-y, until you realize that sales is not really even necessarily the main outcome, but really it's about changing hearts and minds. It's about furthering a cause. It's about helping people at scale. Maybe people you'll never even know that you helped just because you're consistently showing up with valuable information, right? So I think that's thought leadership. I think it's under marketing, but it's like, a little more than that too. And then finally, sales is sales is a process, and sometimes it's a conversation, like a one-on-one conversation, like a sales call. Sometimes it's a conversation that's maybe done through a sequence of emails, or good thought leadership at scale can create sales as well. But it's a process to convey your value even beyond what marketing does, to answer your potential clients' questions, address your leads and needs. This is the thing that's actually going to generate revenue. And so when I think about my sales, like what sales looks like in my company, when I think about, my LinkedIn content sprint, which I do a few times a year, I aim to serve about 20 people in a cohort, but I don't do sales calls. It's all via emails, With my VIP days, I usually have one sales call because I'm usually speaking directly to the decision maker who I'm going to do that LinkedIn work with. With my custom larger B2B contracts, I usually have a series of sales calls with multiple different people. So sales looks different. Sales contains multitudes. As far as your question on how does everything work together in a cohesive way, I think if you're thinking about all of these things in your business's ecosystem, you're in good shape. They all work together. So thoughtful marketing makes your branding more clear and resonant, which then makes your sales so much easier because you're bringing in the right potential clients. And if you're actively showing up as a thought leader, it also makes your sales a lot easier and faster because that trust is built even before you hop on a call together. How does that land with you?
Hi, Tania. This is Lex Roman. I empower creatives to make smarter marketing bets. And one of the things I struggle with, and I also see my clients struggle with, is the idea of hooks in content. So whether we're writing on LinkedIn or somewhere else, even like a webinar title, boiling down what is usually a complex backstory, a complex expertise, it's challenging. So I'm curious how you think about hooks and getting people's attention right off the bat.
Hey, Lex. Okay, this is a great question that plays off the next one I'm going to answer too. So let's talk about hooks. So I do understand the perspective that some people have that if you tailor your content to the super busy, all over the place, or low attention span reader, that's who you're going to attract as a customer. And is that who you want? Like, I get that, but I'm also a realist. And the reason I advocate for LinkedIn is because that's where decision makers hang out. And if you think about your own behavior as a CEO or a business owner, you are probably skimming, right? You're scrolling, you're moving, you're multitasking. Maybe you're checking LinkedIn at a red light. I don't recommend that, but I've been there before. And so I think that it's important to start your post with a hook or something that will pique your reader's attention, get them to stop just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and instead click see more because they want to see more. And so the job of every line in your LinkedIn post or email or copy is meant to get the reader to keep going to the next line. And the job of the hook is to get the reader to even read it in the first place. And so as far as some examples of things that I think work well as hooks, so, it could be a personal or a client win that boosts your credibility. Like if you're a fundraising consultant who just helped a client raise $1 million gift, start the story with that, right? There's a lot of power to this. As I copy coach content inside my Sprint container, oftentimes people are wanting to begin a post with something like, and now I'm going to tell you a story about a great fundraising win. And then they go into the story. But instead, just start with something like, my client had never held $1 million check until yesterday, right? You know what I mean? Like, which one are you more likely to keep reading onto? So that's, one thing. It could be a surprising statistic. It could be a nugget of inspiration, like something that, it would just be something inspirational. It could be like an I can't believe they did that kind of fact. It could be a provocative question or a cliffhanger kind of statement. Like, it would start with a cliffhanger, which then opens up a loop that we want to keep reading about, right? We want to know what happens. It could be a hot take, right? Where you take a common idea in your sector, or something that's kind of taken as fact, and turn it on its head inside that post. And finally, I would recommend writing the sentence last, even though it's the first sentence. I'd write the whole thing, and then I would start to think about, okay, how can I encapsulate this idea, this complex idea, and just intro it in the most interesting way without it being clickbait, right? Like, it might take some practice, but you can find that balance. You want to make sure the hook is speaking to what you're talking about in the post, right? You don't want it to be clickbait, but you do want it to be something striking that people actually can't wait to click see more on.
I'm Christina Edwards. I'm the founder of Splendid Consulting. I work with social impact leaders, getting them out of idea mode and into action mode. Okay, LinkedIn. I see a lot of people do this sort of bait and switch thing on LinkedIn where they are saying something in the first sentence that seems controversial and seems like a hot take, but then ends up not really being one, just trying to boost engagement. Is there a better way to get your stuff read and shared and engaged upon? Second thing is I see a lot of engagement circles where thought leaders are tagging coaches, consultants, friends in the post just to get more eyeballs and traction. Do we have to do this? Is there another way to improve engagement on LinkedIn? Thank you so much.
Hey, Christina, your question is such a perfect way to continue this last question from Lex. So again, I do believe in hooks. I think we should use them. And it goes back to our intentionality. We want people to read our content because we truly are showing up with value and helpful information. And we should never, it doesn't help us to mislead people or try to get people to read just for the sake of having a higher engagement number. And I do know what you mean. I have seen this as well. And, I think maybe the first time they do it, or the first time this happens, maybe a few more people will read the post than if folks had done something different. But again, people will lose trust in you. And the whole point of thought leadership is to build top of mind trust. The whole point of showing up on LinkedIn is to show up as like a go-to voice that people want to hear from. And so if you do this bait and switch thing, the next time your name or your content comes up in their feed or in their inbox, or maybe even in real life, there's going to be a bad taste in their mouth if you keep just sharing clickbait content. So let's talk about engagement circles too. So when I think of engagement circles, actually, the first thing that comes to mind is something slightly different than what you brought up, which is this thing that people call engagement pods, which is where a group of people commit to liking or commenting on each other's posts within that pod with a goal of boosting each other's engagement and being seen in front of more people, right? It's sort of like, engineering more engagement. And there's a lot of mixed opinions and mixed feelings about this. And this is what I think about it. When people are first getting started with posting on LinkedIn, maybe they're a newer consultant, or maybe they just have been, getting business from word of mouth and referrals. And they're like, okay, I need to start building a bigger voice. It's scary. Like, it's uncomfortable. It's very, very, it goes against what we have been conditioned to do. All the systematically limited beliefs of what are people going to think? What if nobody likes my post? What if people think I'm full of myself? Like, all these voices and these fears from our inner chaperone begin to emerge here. And so at this point in our thought leadership journey, I do think that something like a pod can be helpful. I've actually called this a Campfire Circle with some folks that I've worked with. This is a group of peers who are committed to supporting each other, not for the intention of vanity metrics, for the intention of holding each other through the scary action of getting visible, right? That I think is great for depending on where you're at. But over the long term, engagement pods aren't something anyone should really rely on because one, people who are somewhat like even a little bit familiar with LinkedIn can kind of tell when you're in a pod. I certainly can. And it's kind of like, okay, I know what you're doing here. But more importantly, two, you want your content to be shared and commented on because it's good and not just because someone is required to leave you a comment by, within whatever minutes of you posting it or, So the best way to improve engagement on LinkedIn, this is going to be maybe an unsatisfying answer for some people, but it's to write resonant content that truly helps and lands with people. The best way to improve your engagement is to create content that people actually want to engage with. And so similarly, when in terms of your actual question around people tagging a whole bunch of people in their posts to get more eyeballs or traction, it always goes back to intention. So I will share my own perspective. So if I get tagged in a post because it makes sense, that is great. As I record this, I just got back from the nonprofit storytelling conference, and there have been a bunch of posts from peers and consultants, fellow speakers, also fundraisers from throughout the country who attended and tagged me and reflected on what they learned from my session about LinkedIn. And that felt really great. That felt awesome. That made my day every time it happened. And I'm always going to engage in that post with gratitude, which of course ends up bringing their post to more people's feeds. And I have, I don't know how to say this. I have quite a lot of people that are following me, right? So that's going to be a good thing. But if I get tagged in something that I have no business being tagged in, it has nothing to do with me. I don't even know that person, right? We've never had a conversation. That doesn't feel great because I know that I'm tagged in that post for the sole purpose of them growing their numbers. Now, it's like if we're friends, that's a different story. But if it's just somebody who I know is fully just about riding my coattails for more engagement, that's not a great thing. And here's the thing. If I untag myself, which I can do, it's actually going to hurt that post. And so I know I got a little into the weeds here, but as with everything else, I always think it's about intention. And I think it's about showing up within the boundaries of a healthy relationship. I think it's about showing up in the world in ways that feel good and right. My old mentor used to say, can you put your head on your pillow at night? And that translates to how we use LinkedIn, right? So yeah, what do you think about that?
I am Jennice Chewlin, and I am the founder and CEO of Chewlin Group. We help organizations who give a damn about the health and well-being of their workforce through strategic consulting and engaging trainings to help manage stress, prevent burnout, and return to joy. My question for you, Tania, is how can I shift the way I think about LinkedIn from a chore or a have to do into a more joyful task where I am not only willing to make time, but have the experience be something that I enjoy?
What a super lovely question, and just a great way to round out this episode, Jennice. So thank you for this question. What I would say to this is, as we practice publishing our perspective and sharing our opinions and talking about what we're passionate about, we show up in ways that are fully aligned to our values and vision, which is oftentimes different from ways we've had to show up in the world before, And because how we do one thing is how we do everything, I think showing up on LinkedIn is not just about content creation, right? Or marketing. Because as we stretch ourselves to get 1% more vulnerable or deeper with the stories that we're sharing on LinkedIn, the effects that we start to have in our own life and leadership and in our relationships can really be beautiful and amazing. And again, yes, LinkedIn can move the needle in your business. And I think it supports our own self-actualization because so often our businesses or the nonprofits we work for are based in the problems that we faced ourselves and that we are committed to helping others through so that they don't have to struggle figuring it out themselves, right? Like maybe we had to. And also, not in every case, but in many cases, our clients are the people we once were or still are. And so reflecting and sharing about the things that are important to us can be really powerful, right? They can be joyful. And so 2 prior podcast interviews come up in my mind where my guests really kind of talked about this. One is with Joy Malik, who's a coach for INFJs. She's an INFJ herself, like I am. Shout out to INFJs. And she says a lot of the time when she would think about sharing content on behalf of her business, her therapy business, it was her like sitting down and saying, what do I need to hear this morning? Because her ideal client was her at different ages of her life, different stages of her life, right? So her content revolves around thinking, okay, what kind of validation did I need in this moment when this thing was showing up? What did I need to hear then? What did I need people to reflect back to me? And again, that can be very healing and in turn, very joyful. And so when we approach LinkedIn in terms of like, how can I be helpful? How can I be a resource and chip away at this problem that I care about so deeply? Maybe it's because it's one that we faced ourselves. I think that's one way. Another conversation that comes up in my mind is when I interviewed Kel Haney, who is an outbound fundraising coach and consultant for theater organizations, art organizations. And she talks about how thought leadership on LinkedIn for her is helping her reflect on, on her career, reflect on things that she's learned, have her be honest with herself about the difficulties around, around fundraising, around all kinds of things that she works on now. And then, the second part of it is that people actually respond with things like, oh my God, I'm so glad you said this. I didn't know anyone else felt like this. You're making me feel like I can actually do this, right? And so I'll link both of those podcast episodes in the show notes. But yes, I think LinkedIn can move from being a chore, or just like a slog, into a more joyful task because content creation can give us the ability to really self-actualize ourselves. And in turn, it also helps us build a joyful, like-minded community, right? And that's what this is all about. And so with that, this was so much fun. I want to thank you so much, not only just for listening to this episode, but for hanging out with me for some portion of 50 whole episodes of the Campfire Circle. What a dream. Here's to 50 more. And as always, I would love to hear from you on how this episode landed with you. Talk to you soon. Okay, so you've heard from us. Now I want to hear from you. Leaving a review helps us so much in growing our reach and supporting more folks with this podcast. And even better, I would love for you to send me a note on LinkedIn with your takeaways from this episode. I cherish and respond to every message, so I can't wait to hear from you. And if you want to go even deeper, check out the show notes to take your next step.